get started, all of us want to honor the time commitment that you're making to be part of this. And we very much appreciate it. Lydia Martin, who of course was our discussion leader just a couple of hours ago, is back. Thank you for that, Lydia, and thanks for your wisdom very recently. This is the fourth and final scheduled session, but as I mentioned before, we're going to have a bonus session, the first predictable, decent weather outdoor day. We're going to go outdoors, we're going to have some good food, and we're going to sort of try to pull it all together and, figure out what it all means. So in the meantime, just a reminder that the goal here, the focus is to be talking about individual leadership and perhaps focusing on what are some of the elements that seem necessary for individual leadership to be present. I hope you'll all consider the various challenges and categories in the brochure and which ones matter to you. Think about how one can define leadership. I think it's very hard, and whether leadership is truly innate or can be teachable, circumstantial, and sadly, because of the events of the outside world that we've been seeing, whether and how leadership can go off the rails and how it can improve things that you do with your own groups. So that's big picture. The way that we're going to do this is the same way we did it just very recently, earlier this afternoon, where we introduce our discussion leader, Orlando, and then Orlando has some sort of thoughts, sort of overarching thoughts to provide. And then we'd like all of us to be asking Orlando questions so we can turn it into a true dialogue. And then I'll wrap things up a little bit at the end. Our facilitator will be Eleanor Schonbrunn. She is right there. She is among the leadership of STAY, as is Orlando, by the way. And she'll be sort of leading us through this process. Eleanor, would you like to introduce Orlando?
Sure. Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Steve. My name is Eleanor. I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I'm a first year in Franklin College and plan on studying economics and global affairs. Great to be here with y'all, and I have the absolute pleasure of introducing someone who has served as a leader and mentor with students and alumni at Yale Stay for many years now. Orlando Yarbrough III earned his PhD in genetics from Yale, investigating the genetics of high blood pressure. He completed his Yale postdoc in internal medicine, investigating mitochondrial metabolism in type 2 diabetes. Today, Orlando coaches, speaks, and trains internationally on leadership with the John Maxwell team, among his many accomplishments, including work in Guatemala, where he trained more than 20,000 Guatemalan leaders in just 3 days, and worked with others in that process. He then returned with his wife, Rochelle, who earned her MD PhD from Yale. So it's a Yaley family, love it, to do even more fantastic work. With their daughter, Orlando and Rochelle belong to the Church on the Rock in New Haven, where they have been co-leaders of the young adult ministry since 2004. Orlando was ordained in 2015 and serves as pastor at the Black Church at Yale. If everyone can please join me in welcoming Orlando.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be with you, and I'm just happy for our time together. And to prepare, I wrote down some notes and thoughts. And I thought about, I recognize that who I show up as today is very different from who I showed up as 10 years ago. And there's certain things that have marked my leadership. So I asked myself, what are my personal leader shifts, which I call leadership decisions that have marked me, and leadership decisions that have changed how I show up. Kind of irrevocable lessons that I carry with me into the next thing that I do, and really kind of filter through my thoughts when I think about how to move forward in a particular capacity. And as I was jotting down, I came up with 9 of them. It's not conclusive, and I won't go into any depth, but I'll just kind of mention them. But I'm happy to talk about any of these or anything that I don't mention. And I'm also happy to pause at any point. And as I thought about these different lessons, I gave them a little name or a description that helps me to, that really describes what changed in me as a result of the lesson. So first, thinking of college, change it. So change it is the lesson that I learned I saw a family member lose a lot of his life and a lot of his lifestyle and a lot of his reputation fairly quickly. So much faster than it took him to put his life together, I saw him lose his lifestyle as we knew it. And my reply to this was a thought that if life can be fleeting, then I want to live for something bigger than me. And this was at a time where I was applying to grad school. So I had my applications in, and I really wanted to be kind of a marine biologist. I just love fish and loved animals. And what shifted for me is that I decided that I didn't want to pursue a PhD just for my own interest, but I wanted to do it for the betterment of others. Because if I worked for something bigger than me, then even the sacrifice that I went through would go further. So I decided on biomedical research instead of just research for my own particular interest. The second one was in grad school. Stick with it is a lesson that I learned. And grad school was particularly tough and challenging, in some ways extremely rewarding, in other ways very traumatizing here at Yale. And there were multiple points where I was encouraged to switch, to do something different, to not continue to just take what I had. If you're getting a PhD at Yale in the sciences, you can walk away with a master's at some point after you qualify. And I had a couple of choice points, but I said to myself that if I can get through this, then I'll have the confidence and the skill set to get through anything. And I decided to stick with it because I calculated that it would give me a type of understanding about myself that would carry on a long time. And part of that that I recognize now is that there's sometimes I think people can develop a muscle memory for how they experience things and experience life. And for me, I developed a muscle memory, a physiology around completing things. And that's what happened with this PhD. I was just able to develop that. So stick with it. Guatemala, my lesson there was try it. This was during my postdoc years, unrelated to my postdoc. So graduate school taught me nothing about people skills, but I needed people skills in order to do collaborative research. And I learned people skills other places. And I was a part of this training company, and we had this opportunity to go to Guatemala and train 14,000 of their leaders in leadership roundtables based on values, because the country wanted to transform itself. And what I learned there is that I have transferable skills, that I'm more than just what any particular person sees me to be. And I learned that I'm more than just a scientist who could pipette, that I could do other things in order to help bring positive change in the life of other people. And for me going to Guatemala, there was no precedent for me to go, but I went. And what I take from that is just try it, just try it and see what I can learn about myself in the process. Follow it. So the Black Church at Yale, someone asked me to apply to be pastor of the Black Church at Yale about 6 years ago. And it's a longer story, but I didn't know whether I should do it. I didn't know if it was for me to do. There were a lot of upsides and downsides. But when I went to visit, I noticed that there was just a sweet spirit among the students in the church. And I didn't know whether or not I should participate, but I did know that God was there. And I decided just to follow where God was, and in the process, learn whether or not I had something to contribute to what was happening there. And that's something that I continue to do. When I don't know whether or not I should participate, I say, well, let me follow what I do know. And what I know, God is there, so I can't go wrong. Touch it. There's a course at Yale School of Management called IPD, Interpersonal and Group Dynamics. And there are two faculty members who teach it, Heidi Brooks and David Tate. It's one of the most one of the more popular courses at Yale in SOM. And they facilitate the course. And then some of us serve as co-facilitators of a lab of, 10, 8, 12 graduate and professional students who sit in a circle for 3 hours once a week throughout the semester. And we have tough conversations about our intent, our impact. We give and receive feedback. We work through hurt and things that we say that may offend someone, or ways that we encourage each other or dismiss each other. And what I learned is that when I'm willing to sit kneecap to kneecap with someone, we're able to work through conflicts that otherwise would go unresolved. And what I took away is that there's something about my willingness to touch the humanity in somebody else that allows me to not just see life through Orlando's lens, but really consider another person. And it's not only touching their humanity, but me being vulnerable enough to touch my own humanity and be vulnerable and put myself out there in a way that I otherwise wouldn't want anybody to know that I'm concerned or hurt or insecure, or that I'm overly confident. But IPD taught me to touch it, embrace it. I'm just finishing being immediate past chair of a organization in New Haven. I'm still on the board of it now as treasurer. It's called Friends Center for Children. It's an early childhood education that has no majority, no ethnic majority, no gender majority, and it has a sliding scale tuition, which means everyone should be able to afford high quality early childhood care for their children. And during this time of COVID crisis, I recognized that if there is any occasion for leadership, is during the time of crisis. And I had every opportunity and some desire to just step down, not, resign, step aside. But I chose to embrace this moment of leading through crisis, leading through ambiguity, and being willing to pioneer a path forward where there wasn't clear direction. And as a leader, me choosing in that moment with my team to embrace this time and not just avoid making the tough decisions has really marked me in terms of who I am and how I show up. The next, there's 3 more. The next is allow it. So I was recently appointed to the school board, the Board of Education for the City of New Haven Public Schools. And allow it means accept the process. So accept the process for what God wants to do. So I had, and I have to be willing to let my guard down, to be vulnerable, to be willing to engage in interactions I wouldn't ordinarily agree to or sign up for. So being a part of a city organization is a very public thing. The meetings are public, the communications are public, and I'm pretty much a private guy. And I think going back to what I experienced in college with a family member, I like to protect my family today. And the idea of being involved in something that is more public than I care for it to be and much more political than I'm not a political person, it was a very challenging decision for whether or not I should get involved. And what I decided was I'm going to allow the process and see whether or not I'm selected to participate. And since the work is bigger than I am I'm willing to be vulnerable for the sake of a bigger cause. The second to last thing is to transform it. Right now, I train leaders and train leaders within organizations. And I work with a state, one of my clients is a state government organization. And I recognized like some of the topics are, leadership development and communication or team building, but they also requested training for trauma-informed strategies, working through urban trauma, cross-cultural communication, and being able to work through conflict. And what I recognize is that every assignment is an opportunity for me to help transform outcomes, to develop the most appreciable asset an organization has, which are people. People are the asset. And so my approach now in any conversation, in any interaction, is how can I help transform the outcomes of this encounter? When I preach on Sundays and I pray, my prayer is that everyone leaves here changed, that no one leaves here the same way, but everyone leaves different than how they showed up and better than how they showed up. And if I can add value in that way, then I've done my job. But if I don't add value in that way, then I'm concerned about my participation. And then the last thing is grow for it. And it has to do with stay. It has to do with this organization and this conversation that we're participating in tonight, students and alumni of Yale. If you're not involved in stay, I encourage you to become involved. Stay is a growth environment. Over the course of my 6 or so years being involved, it's a growth environment on Yale's campus like none other. A lot of environments on Yale's campus are do environments where you do a number of things, but not many environments are growth environments, where it's not just about you executing, but it's also about you growing in the process and developing specific skills and becoming more aware of different things. And stay is one of the experiences that I've had under Steve's leadership that has really transformed my perspective of my value, my capacity to learn and to grow, and my ability to help encourage and inspire others to become more of who they are and to be their best selves. So I'll stop there, but those are some of the lessons through a lot of energy and tears and questions and also victories that really transform how I make decisions today as a leader and whether or not I choose to participate in something and accept a role. So thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of those amazing 9 tips and what you've learned over your years. You said something during Transform It that I kind of want to start off the facilitation conversation with. And anyone that has questions up, please be sure to chime in. We would love to hear your questions and what you have to say. But my question for you is, you were talking about how to leave people changed. And so who has done that for you? Who has gotten you to the point where you are at? Who has been your mentor and your guide throughout this process?
Yes, a lot of people. One I'll mention because he'll have a connection to Yale shortly, but one is my college president, Freeman Rabowski. And he started at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, this program to increase the number of diverse PhDs in the sciences in STEM, and even to specifically increase the number of Black males in STEM and Black women and open it up to any kind of diversity in STEM. And he had this vision and started off with just one class of individuals. I came in as the 11th class. I think now they might have 40 classes of students who have gone through. I had no vision for myself. I grew up Black in Baltimore. And when I turned 18, I was surprised that I was alive. I was like, oh, wow, I'm alive. A lot of people weren't. The statistics didn't say I was going to make it. When I turned 21, I was thoroughly shocked. I was like, wow, I'm alive. I have to have a vision for my life now. But up until then, I was just living off the vision of my mother and my family and others around me. And when I came to UMBC, he painted this vision of getting a PhD in the sciences that I had never before heard of, even though I had studied Black history and knew people were scientists. So he has forever changed me because he painted a vision for me that was bigger than what I thought of myself. And then he developed the resources to prepare me and to walk me hand by hand through that. Yale has an award called the Boucher Medal, which is named after Edward Alexander Boucher, who was first African-American to get a PhD in North America. And he received it from Yale in physics and also graduated from Yale College. And this year, I think they're bringing back Dr. Abowsi because he's retiring from UMBC. And yeah, it's a long answer, but his vision for what was possible completely changed my vision for where I wanted to go. And I was so clueless that we had to always stand up and say who we are, what we're doing. And I said, I want to be a MD, PhD in marine biology. Now, that didn't even make sense then, and it doesn't make sense now. But I was just saying what I heard, putting together what I heard somebody else say, MD, PhD, and I love marine animals. I was that clueless, but he gave me vision and really helped. So thank you. Long answer, but thank you.
It's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. I've got a question in the chat from, looks like Miss Martine and Reese as well. How can one share and motivate the vision that you have with volunteers?
Oh, say more about that question, please.
Hi, I'm a diver. And I'm on the ordination path and
Yay.
I am planting a church in Bridgeport. So the idea is, eco-sustainability with theology. And so in Bridgeport, specifically, Shalom Bridgeport, peace in Bridgeport. So how do I share the visions? Because churches need volunteers. So how do I share the vision? How do I do it?
When the vision is bigger than you, which this vision is that you're describing, you need help to do it. And when people see themselves in the vision, so there are people who will come and participate because it's you. And then there are people who will come and participate because they've just fallen in love with the vision. And so I'm a type of person where I will participate in the vision independent of the people. But there are some people who will participate in the vision because of the people involved. And so when the people leave, they leave. But for me, people can leave and come and go, but I'll stick with the vision because I'm a vision person. But you'll have both types of people attracted to you. But the key is to transfer their loyalty to the vision, because then they won't just work for you, but they'll work for the vision. They see the picture of it. This Sunday, I'm likely to give a message of reflection, preach on the topic, you're gifted for it. And helping people to see how their gifts and their capacities are for a particular assignment or for a particular purpose. And so when people can see that, when they can actually connect the dots between who they are and what the positive change is that comes because of their involvement, then people tend to give, and not just give based on a timeline, but they give some of their discretionary energy. And anytime you're planning something, a lot of times the work is bigger than what people initially think it is. And so having volunteers who are willing to give of themselves and give in a discretionary way can be very powerful and can carry the vision forward. So definitely to begin, I usually have a series of vision casting conversations. But even before that, I have vision shaping conversations where I bring together people and I share my thoughts, but I invite them to speak into the vision, because then it becomes a collective kind of vision forward. So it's not just me, but it's more of a collective vision. And then that's it. The collective vision is what I cast. And I think people step up to that in terms of volunteers.
That was great. Thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand, they're more than welcome to. But Orlando, you just talked about how your vision keeps you going. Would you mind defining a little bit more what that vision is, what keeps you going, what gets you up every day when it comes to how to be a leader and the leader you want to be?
Oh, good question. Let's see. In college, when I experienced this kind of challenging time with a family member, I just had this peace eventually. I didn't have it initially, but I initially just developed this peace where I was no longer living for myself. I wanted to do something bigger than myself, something that contributed to others. And I just had this peace for me. And there's a particular, somebody was sharing a message and spoke about how, well, I'll just share what the message was, because that's the fastest way, about the children of Israel going into a promised land. And there were a small group of people who already had their reward, already had kind of their peace, but they were charged to go ahead of their family members to help their family members grab and obtain what was for them. So they weren't the primary leader. They weren't Joshua leading the army, but they were just part of the battlefront who was supposed to go with their brothers armed in order to help their brothers gain what was for them. I'm that person where I have in this life all that I need. I don't need another degree. I don't need another accolade. I didn't need the PhD. It was for a greater work. And so my vision and my responsibility, my purpose is to help people to get their best life. And their best life in whatever capacity that is. And so I wake up trying to say, how can I serve in all my diverse relationships to help people get their best life? So that's my vision, to be a servant and help people to get their best life.
Thank you. All right. Another question. What are some leadership traits that you consider your best assets? And what are some that you wish that you had that you wish you could improve on?
I'm very strategic, very introspective, which I appreciate. And sometimes that takes, it results in me taking a long time to make decisions, which can be very challenging, especially if it's a crisis scenario, especially if there's a timeline. At Friends Center for Children, we are actually, the school is based off of Quaker principles and practices. And so as a board, we don't vote. We actually come to an agreement for what direction we want to go in. And a lot of times that takes a lot of time to figure out where all the members are versus a singular leader saying, oh, I'm going to make the decision on what we're going to do. So for me, I think my strength is being strategic, being a good listener, being introspective and reflective. And what ends up happening is that it can also be a weakness. And so I collaborate with others who are a little faster paced and can help me be decisive.
That's great. Thank you so much. Reese, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you for sharing with us.
Hey, Reese.
I'm wondering, many of us on the call probably are drawn to serve the greater good, whatever that means for us and in our lives. As a relatively inexperienced leader, I tend to overextend, and I'm not sure if that resonates with anyone else on the call. So I'm wondering, with so many opportunities to contribute to lots of things that are bigger than us, how do you choose? Do you have a process? Do you go with your gut? Is there something else? What do you do?
Good question. One, I think I struggle in that area as well. And I think I have a few people around me who I lead with. Some of them are family members, but some of them I actually lead with. And we have a good sense of each other's larger purpose. And they help me to make transitions between leadership roles, between leadership opportunities. They help me to form timelines that might allow me to take on a new leadership role, but maybe diminish responsibilities or shift responsibilities in another leadership role. One of the most important parts for me of leading is replicating or multiplying leaders and working myself out of a job and raising up other people who can do the work. And part of what I work on is, usually in my discernment, one of the bigger challenges is I can't do another thing. I can't meet another person, have another conversation. But I have to find a way to, one, build the capacity of others, and two, to try to discern timing. So for something today may not be a good day, but if I shift things in terms of my responsibilities, then in a week or in a month or in a year, something may be good. So just specifically speaking, so I was chair of my board for Friends Center for Children, and part of me taking on the extra work of being a volunteer with the Board of Education for New Haven Public Schools was me and the rest of the board of Friends Center actively developing another leader to be able to be the chair of the board while I started to do something else. So there's a partnership even between my organizations for how I can do something new or do something different. I don't know if that helps or speaks to what you're thinking, Reese.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great, Orlando. Thank you. Julian put something in the chat. Thank you kindly. You touched some of us early on with your story, but what should folks work to fend off darkness? What should leaders do to take care of themselves and hold off feelings of insurmountability?
Be grounded, be gifted, be growing. So really, for me, really being grounded on my own reality and not overinflating myself, but also not deflating myself, and not overflating others who are around me, and also not kind of undervaluing who's around me. So really be grounded in the reality and the truth of who I am, what's going on, what's happening. Growing people, I think, always have a future. And so me being growth oriented and not just a doer, but trying to increase and develop my capacity to do my work better and to be a better member of my family and community. And then to work in my gifts, to really just work in when I work in an area that I'm gifted, the amount of the nature of the energy that I use to prepare and to execute is different from when I work in an area where I'm not gifted. So for instance, I can communicate, I can share a thought. And so, I've taken these notes, but right now it's about connecting and communicating with you. If I'm so nervous and concerned about me being a speaker, then all of my energy is focused there. And sometimes I can lose the ability to connect and communicate. But when I operate in my area of giftedness, then I can focus on the change and not so much on kind of the process or the tool that I'm using to engage. I don't know how that comes across, but giftedness, I think, is very important. And then the last thing is something I call Nourishment Centers, which are just songs that speak truthfully to me, quotes that are truthful, people in my life who encourage me, recreational activities that recreate me. And I have a list of those. They're on demand. And when I need to kind of revive myself and feel as if I can make it and be rejuvenated, I tap back into those things. And those things encourage me. Maybe about 10 or 8.
Hey, Orlando, it's Steve. I can't resist but pop in. I listened to your sermon last Sunday. I think it was last Sunday. And you talked about Jesus, or Jesus confronting the devil, or vice versa.
Yes.
And a little bit of what you just said, or the whole situation, confronting darkness and despair, reminded me of, some of the things you said there about sort of, coming from where you are and who you are. You mentioned, playing from your gifts. So I just had to mention that because it made me think of that.
Yes. Yeah. And one thought on that, which is maybe a little bit different than what you're thinking, but it made me think of the thought that you just, about what you just said. My strengths are a tool of encouragement and also a tool of offense. And one of my strengths is encouragement, building people up, building myself up. And that is both offensive and defensive, just kind of shining light in a scenario and being bright. So sometimes when it's a discouraging moment or it's a dark period of time, I try to shine light on it in ways that I can do it best. And then I partner with other people who can shine a light on it in ways where they can do it best. Like I couldn't sing in a way that would be encouraging, but I could get my wife to sing in a way. So, that's how I kind of deal with things that are dark or insurmountable. They seem insurmountable.
I love that perspective. Thank you so much. Roxana, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Orlando. I have a question, and perhaps this is kind of a continuation of Julian's question, but has there ever been a time or many times where you felt like you are giving so much to your community, pouring in all of your heart and soul, that you're almost neglecting yourself in a way, or kind of like you're giving so much and you love it, but like how do you balance trying to give back to the community and doing, kind of fulfilling this higher purpose for something beyond yourself, while also realizing that you have to maintain your own well-being, and like where does that balance come into for you, and how do you navigate that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Thank you for the insight. It's an ongoing challenge and battle. I definitely lean on people around me to help, but I intentionally schedule things that refresh me, whether it's going on a long car ride where I can just think, because I'm introverted. And so when I drive, it's an experience. I can think. The same is true when I run long distance. When I run long distance, I can clear my mind. I can think. But running long distance, driving, having a home aquarium are things that I can do where I'm creating this mini environment of life. There are things that I do to help refresh me. Also, practically speaking, I will stack commitments, or because a lot of leadership is extroverted, it's with other people, or it's not necessarily extroverted, but it's with other people. And so I will have, like for today, I had scheduled for today, it didn't happen, they canceled it, but I had scheduled a 9 to 5 virtual training that I was giving, or 9 to 4 virtual training. And then I have this. So sometimes I will put all of my meetings in one weekend, or put all of my meetings for a given week in one particular day, or one section of a day. And so that allows me to say, okay, Orlando, you're going to give a lot of yourself, but it's going to be for a specified period of time. And then the other time you can recover. So that's one of the things that I try to do. I try to be intentional about how I schedule my time. And I try to think, well, when do I need to be creative? And how do I protect that time? Because I might need to write during that time. When's a good time for me for meetings? When's a good time for me to do other work that doesn't, maybe it's technical work that doesn't require a lot of thought. But, so maybe I'll do that at night, something of that nature. So I try to think, what types of work do I do better when, and how can I stack my experiences such that there's actually some orchestration to them.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Matt, you just raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a question. In the last session, we heard a little bit about purpose and how maybe you don't necessarily have to find your purpose. But I'm curious as to how you kind of think about that in the context of, sometimes you may have a calling on your life, and then on the personal side, but then, you may also have a different set of professional skills that may not necessarily line up with what maybe you think your calling is. How do you think about, kind of balancing those two things?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I try to live in a almost like a perpetual sense of discovery, because I think the last thing I might have gone after for myself out of my own idea might have been graduate school. And even then, somebody else introduced it to me. So I'm not necessarily driven by my own ambition, or I have a sense of purpose and then I apply for a particular activity or opportunity. A lot of things come to me and come to my awareness, and then I have to discover, what role do I have in this? And it's only through me accepting a variety of opportunities or discerning through certain opportunities that I learn more about my particular skill set and strengths and purpose, and how they may align and work together. But I usually don't have a clear sense of what of my past experiences and lessons learned, and what of any particular strength that I have will contribute to what's in front of me. Sometimes I envision it, but a lot of times, I don't know until I start to get involved. So I walk with a sense of purpose, but I also do it with a sense of discovery, recognizing that I likely don't see the full picture. So the life I'm living today, I would not have painted this life 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 2 years ago. I wouldn't have painted this picture. So I walk with a sense of purpose, knowing that I have something to contribute. And I also walk with a sense of discovery, trying to figure out what more is there to it that I'm not seeing.
Brilliant. It goes back to your idea of being grounded, being gifted, always be growing. I absolutely love it. Speaking of a little bit more about your past, with your connection to Yale, what do you wish that you had taken advantage of? What that you would have wished that you had done more looking back during your time as a student at Yale?
Yes, good question. So I came to Yale for the science program, and I also came for the kind of non-science things that Yale has to offer as a campus and community. And when I graduated in 2010, I wish that I had taken more advantage of those things. And so when I stayed on as a postdoc, I did take on, I did kind of take advantage of those things. And I think Yale is an opportunity where a person can be multidimensional. And a person, I think, can really discover greater depth to themselves and also the people around them. But the question is, what opportunities do I allow myself to engage in that allows me to see those greater depths and opportunities? So when I was a researcher and in lab, depending on the relationships that I had with my lab mates, sometimes we would leave lab, like sometimes we wouldn't know what people did outside of lab. But in lab, we have people who are musicians, people who are runners, people who are, readers and just, actors and actresses and cooks and chefs. But the question is, do I take my drive and pause it long enough to engage in other things, to really kind of deepen my relationships with other people, to discover more of the dimensions of who they are, but also to discover more of the dimensions of who I am. And the one thing that I haven't done, even now that I'm still, here in the area, taking different classes. So in undergrad, I majored in biology, but also Africana studies. And it would have been great, and I would love to still do it in some way, just take additional courses at Yale, not for a grade, because I don't want another assignment, but just to learn and experience the conversations that others are having on a variety of topics.
That's wonderful. I agree about the no grade part with 2 midterms this past Monday. Oh yeah.
Yes.
So what do you think that Yale can double down on today as they're teaching leadership to students, giving back to their communities? What do you think that we could do better?
People skills. The world can be and is often very collaborative, but particularly on the graduate school level, I don't think that is spoken about enough. I think some disciplines lend themselves to it more, like management, business kind of lends itself to it more. But in other disciplines, sometimes there's a focus on the intellectual side, but not actually on the relationship side that often moves a project forward. So I think people skills in terms of leadership. And I think well-being is very important, and wellness, and just being healthy and whole and having a good sense of self that is not performance driven, which is hard, I think, in the American education system. And I'm not sure how it is internationally, and Yale's an international place, but I think sometimes as a community, there can be a lot of performance at Yale and a lot of rewards for performance, academic and otherwise. And it might be nice for us to celebrate just being. One of the sayings that a mentor taught me in a leadership role, international team that I'm on, is be good at what you do, but be great at who you are. And that's what I think it would be great to lean into. Let us be great, kind of who we are as people and as we are as humanity.
That's a wonderful answer. Eleanor, thank you for facilitating.
Thank you, Eleanor.
The bottom of the hour, and I want to make sure that we honor your time commitment. There are a couple of things that I'd like to say as we begin to wrap up this session. But remember, there's still a bonus session coming up with warm weather, food, and an outdoor setting. Orlando, thank you so much for sharing and being open. And as I've done with each of our previous discussion leaders, I'll put my notes together and share them out with everybody. And you'll see commonalities and unique points and so forth. Lydia, at the beginning of this session, I should have done it, and so I'm going to do it now. Just mention a couple of things that sort of struck me in terms of commonalities. Lydia, you mentioned during the time you spent with us the importance of serving to lead, service being a way of opening your eyes to leadership. And of course, that's now been mentioned by all 4 of you, and it's really important. You also indirectly mentioned luck and randomness in how there's an element of luck, in other words. By the way, it may not be luck, it may be God, but we experience it as luck or a roll of the dice, but it's the universe. And then a third thing was the secret superpower that introverts have and that we should all work on, which is introspection, self-awareness, and self-understanding. I know for sure that 2 of the 4 people who have shared leadership with us in the last week are introverts, and that's a compliment. And I suspect that a 3rd one is, we won't name names, but that is a secret superpower, and one that those of us who are not introverts need to work on. Lydia, of course, also mentioned her, what I'll call her, she called her 5 leadership pointers: leading yourself first, leaving metrics behind, cultivating analog joys, relationships are everyone, and not feeling compelled to find your purpose. Your purpose may find you, which is a little bit, I think, of what we heard from Orlando. I was trying to sort of connect the Venn diagrams just now of the 2 of you, and that's the way I would verbalize it. And the to-don't list, which near the end here, Orlando kind of mentioned the to-don't list. You talk about refresh yourself by stacking things. Well, part of that is to create a to-don't list for the time when you're not stacked, so you can listen to yourself and figure out, what's possible. And of course, Lydia also mentioned this. I'm never going to forget this, but what I'll call the 3 dimensions of time. The deep time, task time, and clock time. Really interesting stuff. So I felt it was important to say this just now. I need to absorb, I think, what Orlando, what you just said, and of course, I'll feed back out my notes, which are simply my notes. I want to make a couple of personal observations. I've known Orlando now, as he mentioned, for 6 or 7 years. Funny thing, we talk a lot, and we've broken bread together, of course, with our spouses and all of that. But he accuses me of being his mentor, and that's just not true. He's my mentor. And just listening to you tonight, I learned so much, everything that comes out of your mouth. So I'll put up with it if you ever say that I'm your mentor, but I don't believe it for a minute. I believe the other. It does raise the question of 2-way mentorship, but that's a discussion for another night. I also want to encourage anybody, as Orlando did, to consider joining us at Stay. We have the best email address at Yale. It is, and this is true, stayatyale.edu. I'm not making that up. You write there, one of us will get back to you. So that's a shameless promotion for Stay. So I think this is a good time to call it a wrap. I'm so proud of all of you for spending the time. Many of you have been here for all 4 sessions. That's great. Encourage the people to join us if we do have that bonus session. We'll be doing this again next year, hopefully in person, perhaps at the Graduate Club, maybe at one of the other great new spaces at Yale. But again, I think we should close as we open, which is thanking our amazing alums and our student facilitator for spending the time with all of us and for opening up. Orlando, thank you. Eleanor, thank you. And to all of you, have a great weekend. Don't go too far away. And looking forward to talking with all of you. Take care. Have a good evening.